The moment Ethan Cole saw the woman in the red dress being turned away at the restaurant door, he had no idea that saving her from humiliation would unravel 3 years of carefully guarded grief and fill the empty chair his family had been setting every holiday since the accident. If you want to know how one act of compassion transformed two shattered families into something whole again, stay until the end. And when you do, hit that like button and drop a comment with your city so I can see how far this story travels. Now, let me take you back to where it all began, to a Christmas Eve that changed everything. The snow fell in thick, lazy spirals outside Hartwell's Bistro, blanketing the sidewalks of downtown Maple Ridge in white. Inside, the restaurant glowed with amber light and holiday warmth, candles flickering on every table, garlands strung along exposed brick walls, the rich scent of roasted turkey and cinnamon hanging in the air. Families laughed over full plates. Children tugged at their parents' sleeves, pointing at the oversized Christmas tree near the window. A pianist in the corner played soft renditions of carols that no one really listened to, but everyone seemed to feel. It was the kind of place that made loneliness ache sharper. Ethan Cole sat near the back of the restaurant with his 3 daughters, perfectly aware of that ache. He'd chosen this table on purpose, far enough from the crowd that they wouldn't draw attention, close enough to the kitchen that the noise might drown out the silence between them. His daughters, Mila, Sophie, and Emma, were 10 years old now, identical in appearance but distinct in every other way. Mila sat to his left, her dark eyes scanning the room with quiet intensity. Sophie fiddled with her napkin, folding and refolding it into origami shapes she'd learned from a library book. Emma hummed under her breath, tapping her fork against her water glass in rhythm with the piano. And across from Ethan, between Sophie and Emma, sat an empty chair. It had been 3 years since the accident. 3 years since Julia Cole had kissed her daughters goodnight, climbed into her car to pick up a prescription at the late-night pharmacy, and never made it home. A patch of black ice. A guardrail. Silence. Ethan didn't talk about it much anymore. The girls didn't ask. But every holiday, Thanksgiving, Christmas, Easter, birthdays, they set a place for her. A plate. A glass. Silverware arranged just so. It wasn't morbid, Ethan told himself. It was remembrance. It was respect. It was the only way he knew how to keep her present without falling apart. "Dad, can I get the lobster mac and cheese?" Emma asked, eyes wide with hope. Ethan glanced at the menu, saw the price, and felt the familiar weight settle in his chest. Money wasn't exactly tight, his construction business was doing well enough, but splurging on a $30 pasta dish for a 10-year-old still felt reckless. "How about the regular mac and cheese?" he suggested gently. "Save room for dessert." Emma's face fell, but only for a second. She nodded, leaning back in her chair with a theatrical sigh. "Fine, but I'm getting the triple chocolate lava cake." "Deal." Sophie looked up from her napkin crane. "Can Mila and I share the peppermint cheesecake?" Ethan smiled. "Sure, Soph." Mila, who had been watching the conversation unfold, signed quickly. "Thank you." Ethan signed back. "You're welcome, sweetheart." Learning American Sign Language had been Julia's idea. When Mila was diagnosed with profound hearing loss at 18 months, Julia had thrown herself into it with the kind of fierce determination that defined everything she did. She bought books, enrolled in classes, found deaf community groups, made sure Mila never felt isolated or broken. Ethan had followed her lead, stumbling at first, but eventually becoming fluent enough to dream in signs. After Julia died, signing became sacred. It was the language of the life they'd built together, and Ethan refused to let it fade. The waiter appeared, a young man with a too bright smile and a reindeer antler headband that bobbed when he moved. He took their orders with efficient cheer, collected the menus, and disappeared into the kitchen. Ethan looked around the restaurant. Everywhere he turned, he saw whole families, couples holding hands across candlelit tables, grandparents spoiling grandchildren with extra desserts, a husband adjusting his wife's scarf as she laughed at something he whispered. He felt the emptiness of the chair like a physical presence. "Dad?" Sophie's voice pulled him back. "Yeah, honey? Do you think Mom would have liked this place?" Ethan's throat tightened. He glanced at the empty chair, then back at Sophie. "Yeah, I think she would have loved it." "She would have ordered the lobster mac and cheese," Emma said with a grin. Ethan laughed despite himself. You're right, she absolutely would have. Mila signed, and she would have made us all try it. Every single bite, Ethan agreed, signing as he spoke. The moment settled between them, soft and bittersweet. It wasn't grief exactly, not the raw, bleeding kind from the early days. It was something gentler, a sadness they'd learned to carry without letting it crush them. And then the front door opened. A gust of cold air swept through the restaurant, carrying with it a swirl of snow and the muffled sounds of the street outside. Ethan barely noticed at first, just another customer arriving for dinner. But then he saw her. She stood in the entrance, framed by the falling snow, wearing a long red dress that seemed too elegant for the weather. Her dark hair was dusted with white flakes, her cheeks flushed from the cold. She looked around the restaurant with wide, uncertain eyes, and then she approached the host stand. The hostess, a blonde woman in her 20s with a tablet in her hand, greeted her with a practiced smile. "Good evening. Do you have a reservation?" The woman in the red dress didn't respond. Instead, she lifted her hands and began to sign. The hostess's smile faltered. She glanced down at her tablet, then back at the woman, clearly uncomfortable. "I'm sorry, I don't understand." The woman signed again, more slowly this time, her expression growing desperate. The hostess shook her head. "I'm really sorry, but we're fully booked tonight. If you'd like to make a reservation for another time, you can call us or—" The woman's hands moved faster now, her signs sharp and frustrated. She pointed at the dining room, at the empty tables near the back, signing something that Ethan couldn't quite make out from his seat, but understood in spirit. "There are tables. Why can't I sit?" The hostess took a step back, her discomfort now edging into irritation. "Ma'am, I can't help you if you don't speak. I'm sorry." The woman's shoulders sagged. She stood there for a moment longer, hands falling to her sides, and then she turned toward the door. She was leaving. Ethan's chest tightened. He didn't know her. Didn't know her name, her story, why she was alone on Christmas Eve, but he knew what it looked like to be invisible in a room full of people. He knew what it felt like to be shut out, dismissed, unheard. And he knew his daughter was watching. Mila's hand shot out, gripping his wrist. She signed urgently, "Dad, she's deaf. They won't help her." Ethan looked at his daughter, at the fierce, righteous anger burning in her eyes, and something inside him shifted. Julia's voice echoed in his mind, a memory from years ago. If you see someone struggling and you do nothing, you're part of the problem. He pushed back his chair and stood. "Dad?" Sophie looked up, confused. "Stay here," Ethan said quietly. "I'll be right back." He crossed the restaurant in quick strides, weaving between tables, his heart pounding harder than it should have been for such a simple act. The woman in the red dress had already pushed open the door, one foot on the snow-covered sidewalk, when Ethan reached her. "Wait!" he called out. She didn't hear him. Of course she didn't. He stepped outside into the cold, the snow biting at his face, and gently touched her shoulder. She spun around, startled, her eyes wide and wary. Ethan lifted his hands and signed, "Are you okay?" For a moment, she just stared at him, as if she couldn't quite believe what she was seeing. Then her expression softened and she signed back. "They wouldn't seat me. I don't think they wanted to deal with me." Ethan's jaw tightened. He glanced back through the restaurant window at the hostess, who was now seating a family of 4 with easy efficiency. He signed, "That's not right. You shouldn't have to leave." The woman shook her head, a sad smile tugging at her lips. "It's fine. I'm used to it. You shouldn't be." She studied him for a long moment, snow gathering in her hair, and then signed, "Why do you care?" Ethan hesitated. He thought of Mila, sitting inside, watching this unfold. He thought of Julia, who never walked past someone in need without stopping. He thought of the empty chair at his table, and how it had come to represent not just loss, but the possibility of something more. He signed, "Because no one should be alone on Christmas Eve." The woman's eyes glistened. She looked away, blinking rapidly, and then back at him. "I'm Ethan," he signed, "and I have a table inside with an empty seat. If you'd like to join us, you're welcome to it." She stared at him, clearly torn between disbelief and hope. "I don't want to intrude," she signed. "You're not intruding," Ethan signed back. You'd be helping. Helping? He smiled a little sadly. My daughters and I, we've been setting that chair for someone who can't be here. But maybe tonight it can be for someone who needs it. The woman's hands trembled slightly as she signed, You don't even know me. No, Ethan agreed, but I'd like to. For a moment, the world seemed to narrow to just the two of them, standing in the snow, strangers bound by a language most of the people around them couldn't understand. And then she signed, My name is Lena. Ethan's smile widened. It's nice to meet you, Lena. He gestured toward the door, and after a brief hesitation, she followed him inside. The warmth of the restaurant hit them like a wave. Ethan led Lena through the crowded dining room, past the couples and families and laughter, back to the table where his daughters waited. 3 pairs of identical eyes locked onto Lena as she approached. Ethan signed and spoke simultaneously. Girls, this is Lena. She's going to join us for dinner. Sophie's mouth fell open. Emma blinked rapidly. But Mila smiled. She signed, Hi, Lena. I'm Mila. Lena's face lit up. She signed back, Hi, Mila. It's wonderful to meet you. Are you deaf? Mila asked, direct as ever. I am, Lena signed. Are you? Mila nodded proudly. Since I was a baby. Lena's eyes softened. She looked at Ethan with something close to wonder, and he realized she understood now. Understood why he'd stopped her, why he'd invited her in. This wasn't charity. This was recognition. Ethan pulled out the empty chair, and Lena sat down slowly, carefully, as if afraid the moment might shatter. The waiter returned with their drinks, did a double take at the new guest, but recovered quickly. Can I get you something to drink, ma'am? Lena looked at Ethan, uncertain. Ethan signed, What would you like? Lena signed back, Water is fine. Ethan turned to the waiter. Water, please, and we'll need another menu. Of course. The waiter disappeared. An awkward silence settled over the table. Sophie and Emma exchanged glances, clearly unsure what to make of this stranger in their mother's chair. Mila, however, seemed completely at ease. She signed, Why were you eating alone? Mila, Ethan said gently, signing as he spoke. That's personal. But Lena shook her head, smiling. She signed, It's okay. Then to Mila, I lost my husband 2 years ago. I used to come to this restaurant with him every Christmas Eve. I thought I could handle it alone this year. Mila's expression grew serious. She signed, We lost our mom 3 years ago. We come here to remember her. Lena's eyes filled with tears. She pressed a hand to her chest, nodding. Sophie, who had been watching the exchange, spoke up quietly. That's why we set the extra chair, for Mom. Lena looked at the chair she was sitting in, understanding dawning on her face. She started to stand, signing frantically, I'm so sorry. I didn't know. I'll move. Ethan gently touched her arm, stopping her. He signed, Please, stay. I think she would have wanted you here. Lena sat back down slowly, her hands shaking. Emma, ever the bold one, leaned forward. What was your husband like? Lena smiled through her tears. She signed, and Ethan translated aloud for Sophie and Emma. His name was David. He was hearing, but he learned sign language for me. He was kind, funny. He made the best pancakes. She paused, her smile fading. He had a heart attack. It was sudden. I didn't get to say goodbye. The table fell silent. Then Sophie said softly, Our mom died in a car accident. We didn't get to say goodbye either. Lena reached across the table and took Sophie's hand. She didn't sign anything. She didn't need to. The waiter returned with Lena's water and a menu. She ordered quickly, a simple pasta dish, and handed the menu back. As the evening progressed, something extraordinary happened. The awkwardness melted away. Conversations flowed, sometimes in sign, sometimes in speech, sometimes in both. Lena told them about her life, how she worked as a graphic designer from home, how she'd met David at a coffee shop when he accidentally spilled his drink on her laptop, how they'd been married for 15 years. Ethan shared pieces of his own story, how he'd started his construction business from nothing, how Julia had been his partner in every sense of the word, how he was still learning to navigate life as a single father. The girls opened up in ways they rarely did with strangers. Emma talked about her love of drawing. Sophie shared her dream of becoming a veterinarian. Mila spoke, signed, about the deaf theater group she'd joined at school, how she was going to play the lead in their spring production. Lena listened to it all with rapt attention, asking questions, laughing at their jokes, treating them not as children to be humored, but as people worth knowing. And slowly, imperceptibly, the empty chair stopped feeling empty. When the food arrived, they ate together like a family that had known each other for years instead of hours. Ethan watched his daughters, watched the way they leaned toward Lena, the way they smiled more freely than they had in months, and felt something crack open inside his chest. It wasn't just grief. It was hope. As dessert was being served, triple chocolate lava cake for Emma, peppermint cheesecake split between Sophie and Mila, and tiramisu for Ethan and Lena to share, Emma suddenly announced, "I think we should adopt you." Lena laughed, nearly choking on her water. She signed, "Adopt me?" "Yeah," Emma said seriously. "You're nice. You make Dad smile, and you know sign language. That's like 3 out of 3 requirements." "What are the requirements?" Ethan asked, amused. "Nice, makes you smile, knows sign language," Emma listed off on her fingers. "Duh," Sophie giggled. "I think that's a good list." Mila signed, "I agree." "Lena, you're officially adopted." Lena looked at Ethan, eyes shining. "Are they always like this?" Ethan grinned. "Every single day. I love them already," Lena signed. And just like that, the walls came down completely. They stayed at the restaurant long after they'd finished eating, talking and laughing until the waiter gently hinted that they were one of the last tables still occupied. Ethan paid the bill, insisting when Lena tried to contribute, and they bundled up in their coats, stepping out into the cold night. The snow had stopped, leaving the streets blanketed in white and shimmering under the streetlights. The world felt hushed, holy. Lena signed, "Thank you, for tonight. I didn't think I'd make it through Christmas Eve, but you, all of you made it beautiful." Ethan signed back, "Thank you for joining us. I think we needed you as much as you needed us." Lena smiled, then hesitated. Can I give you my number? I'd love to stay in touch, if that's okay." "I'd like that," Ethan signed. They exchanged phone numbers, and Lena promised to text him the next day. She hugged each of the girls, tight, genuine embraces that spoke of real affection, and then turned to Ethan. For a moment, they just looked at each other. Then Lena signed, "Merry Christmas, Ethan. Merry Christmas, Lena." She walked away into the night, her red dress a bright spot against the snow, and Ethan watched until she disappeared around the corner. "Dad?" Mila tugged on his sleeve. He looked down at her. She signed, "I like her." Ethan smiled. "Me too, sweetheart." "Are we going to see her again?" Sophie asked. "I hope so," Ethan said honestly. Emma grinned. "Good, because she's family now." Ethan laughed, a deep, genuine sound that startled him with its ease. He looked up at the sky, at the stars peeking through the clouds, and felt, for the first time in 3 years, like maybe the future held something more than just survival. Maybe it held joy. They walked home through the snow-covered streets, 4 sets of footprints trailing behind them, and the empty chair, at least for tonight, didn't feel like a ghost. It felt like a gift. Christmas morning arrived with the kind of brittle cold that made breath visible and fingertips ache. Ethan woke before dawn, as he always did, to the sound of silence broken only by the furnace humming in the basement. He lay in bed for a moment, staring at the ceiling, replaying the previous night in his mind. The red dress, the empty chair, Lena's hands moving through the air with grace and urgency, the way his daughters had opened their hearts without hesitation. He reached for his phone on the nightstand. No messages yet. It was early, barely 6 o'clock. He set the phone back down and got up, padding downstairs in his worn flannel pajamas to start coffee. The house felt different this morning. Not emptier exactly, but charged with something he couldn't quite name. Possibility, maybe. Or just the residue of an evening that had felt like stepping outside himself. He was pouring his second cup when his phone buzzed. The message was from an unknown number, but he knew immediately who it was. "Good morning, Ethan. I wanted to thank you again for last night. I haven't felt that welcome anywhere in a very long time. I hope you and your daughters have a beautiful Christmas." Lena. Ethan smiled, his fingers hovering over the keyboard. He typed back, "Good morning, Lena. We're the ones who should be thanking you. The girls haven't stopped talking about you. Merry Christmas." The response came quickly. "They're wonderful. You've raised them beautifully." He felt warmth spread through his chest, equal parts pride and grief. Julia had raised them too. She'd been the one who taught them empathy, kindness, courage. He was just trying not to mess up what she'd started. Before he could reply, another message appeared. "I know this might be forward, but I'm spending today alone, and I was wondering, would you and the girls like to come over this afternoon? I make a pretty decent hot chocolate, and I promise not to overstay my welcome in your lives." Ethan read the message 3 times. It was forward. It was also exactly what he wanted. He typed, "We'd love to. What time?" 2 o'clock? I'll send you my address." "Perfect. See you then." He set the phone down, aware that his heart was beating faster than it should have been. This was just a friendly visit, a continuation of last night's kindness, nothing more, except it felt like more. Footsteps thundered down the stairs, and suddenly all 3 girls burst into the kitchen, still in their matching snowflake pajamas, hair wild from sleep. "Presents!" Emma shouted. "Coffee first," Ethan said, holding up his mug. "And breakfast." "Dad, it's Christmas!" Sophie protested. "Presents come before breakfast on Christmas." Ethan pretended to consider this. "Fine, but only because it's Christmas." They descended on the living room like a small, excitable tornado. Ethan had stayed up late wrapping everything: art supplies for Emma, veterinary science books for Sophie, and a collection of deaf literature and plays for Mila. There were other things too. New winter coats they desperately needed, books, games, the usual hodgepodge of practical and whimsical. As the girls tore through wrapping paper, Ethan found himself thinking about Lena again, about the loneliness she must have felt, walking into that restaurant alone, about the courage it had taken to try. "Dad, you're not paying attention," Emma said, waving a set of watercolor paints in his face. "I am," he protested. "Those are beautiful." Mila signed from across the room. "You're thinking about Lena." Ethan felt his face flush. "How did you—" "You get this look," Mila signed, grinning, "like you're somewhere else." Sophie looked up from her stack of books. "Are we going to see her again?" "Actually," Ethan said, "she invited us over this afternoon. For hot chocolate." The reaction was instantaneous and unanimous. "Yes!" Emma jumped up, scattering wrapping paper everywhere. "Really?" Sophie's face lit up. Mila signed, "I knew it. I knew we'd see her again." "It's just hot chocolate," Ethan said, trying to downplay it even as his stomach fluttered. "She's alone today, and I thought it would be nice—" "Dad, stop," Emma interrupted. "We know." "Know what?" "That you like her." Ethan's mouth fell open. I just met her." "You smiled more last night than you have in forever," Sophie said quietly. "It's okay, Dad. We want you to be happy." Ethan looked at his daughters, these fierce, perceptive little humans who saw through him completely, and felt his throat tighten. "I loved your mom," he said carefully. "I still love her." "We know," Mila signed. "But she'd want you to be happy too." The truth of it hit him like a physical blow. Julia would have wanted exactly that. She would have hated the thought of him spending the rest of his life alone, trapped in grief, setting empty chairs. "So can we go?" Emma pressed. Ethan laughed despite himself. "Yes, we can go." The hours between breakfast and 2 o'clock crawled by with excruciating slowness. The girls played with their new gifts, built a snowman in the backyard, and changed outfits approximately 17 times trying to decide what to wear to Lena's house. Ethan took a shower, shaved, and stood in front of his closet for far too long before settling on jeans and a dark green sweater Julia had bought him years ago. He caught sight of himself in the mirror and paused. When had he stopped looking at himself? Really looking? He was 38 years old, but the past 3 years had carved lines around his eyes and threaded gray through his dark hair. He wasn't old, but he wasn't young anymore either. He wondered what Lena saw when she looked at him. At 1:45, they piled into his truck, a well-worn Ford that had seen better days but still ran faithfully. Lena's address led them to a small neighborhood on the east side of town where the houses were older but well-maintained, with wide porches and mature trees lining the streets. Her house was a modest Cape Cod painted pale yellow with white trim. Christmas lights hung from the eaves, and a wreath decorated the front door. It looked warm, inviting. Ethan parked on the street, and the girls practically exploded out of the truck, racing up the snow-covered walkway. He followed more slowly, carrying a bag of cookies Sophie had insisted they bring. Emma rang the doorbell. A moment later, the door opened, and there was Lena. She wore jeans and a cream-colored sweater, her dark hair pulled back in a loose ponytail. Without the red dress, and the snow, and the restaurant lighting, she looked different, softer, real. She smiled when she saw them, and Ethan felt something shift in his chest. She signed, "You came." "Of course we came," Mila signed back. "You invited us." Lena laughed and stepped aside, gesturing them in. The house smelled like cinnamon and vanilla. A small Christmas tree stood in the corner of the living room, decorated simply with white lights and silver ornaments. There were framed photographs on the mantel. Lena and a man Ethan assumed was David, smiling on a beach somewhere, laughing at a restaurant, dancing at what looked like their wedding. Lena caught him looking and signed, "That's David. I keep his pictures up. I hope that's not weird." Ethan signed back, "Not weird. I do the same with Julia." Understanding passed between them. "Your home is beautiful," Sophie said, looking around. Lena read her lips and smiled. She signed, and Ethan translated. "Thank you. David and I bought it right after we got married. We were going to renovate it together, but—" She trailed off, her smile fading. "But life happened," Ethan finished gently. Lena nodded. "Well," Emma announced, "we brought cookies." She held up the bag triumphantly, and Lena's face brightened. She took the bag, signed her thanks, and led them into the kitchen. The next hour unfolded with surprising ease. Lena made hot chocolate from scratch, real melted chocolate, not the powdered kind, and topped it with homemade whipped cream and crushed candy canes. The girls declared it the best hot chocolate they'd ever had, which earned Lena a pleased blush. They sat around her kitchen table, talking and laughing. Lena showed them her design work on her laptop, logos and branding for small businesses, book covers, wedding invitations. Emma was fascinated, asking 100 questions about color theory and composition. Sophie wanted to know if Lena had ever designed anything for animal hospitals. Mila just watched Lena's hands move, smiling. Ethan found himself relaxing in a way he hadn't in years. There was something about Lena, a quiet strength, a lack of pretense, that made him feel seen. Not as a grieving widower, not as a struggling single father, but just as himself. At some point, Sophie asked the question Ethan had been wondering but hadn't dared voice. "Do you have any family, people you spend Christmas with?" Lena's expression clouded. She signed slowly. "My parents passed away when I was in college. Car accident. I was an only child. David's family, they stopped calling after he died. I think it was too painful for them. Or maybe they just didn't know how to communicate with me without him there to interpret." Ethan felt anger flare in his chest. "That's not right." Lena shrugged, but he could see the hurt beneath her composure. People don't know how to handle grief, especially when there's a communication barrier. "That's not an excuse," Ethan said firmly. Lena looked at him for a long moment, and something wordless passed between them. "You have us now," Emma declared. "We're your family." Lena's eyes filled with tears. She signed, "You barely know me." "Doesn't matter," Mila signed back. "Family isn't always about blood. It's about who shows up." Lena pressed a hand to her mouth, shoulders shaking. Ethan reached across the table and gently touched her arm. "Mila's right," he said, signing as he spoke. "You're not alone anymore. Not if you don't want to be." Lena wiped her eyes, laughing through tears. "How are you all so kind?" "We learned from the best," Ethan said quietly, thinking of Julia. They stayed at Lena's house well into the evening. The girls convinced her to play board games, Monopoly, which devolved into chaos, and then Pictionary, which Lena won handily thanks to her design skills. They ordered pizza when everyone got hungry, eating straight from the box while sprawled across the living room floor. It was chaotic and loud and messy, and absolutely perfect. Ethan watched Lena laugh at one of Emma's terrible drawings, watched her patiently help Sophie understand the rules of the game, watched her sign with Mila in rapid, animated conversation. And he thought, this is what I've been missing. Not romance, necessarily, not yet, but connection, community, the sense of being part of something larger than his own grief. When it was time to leave, the girls groaned in protest. "Can we come back tomorrow?" Emma asked. Lena looked at Ethan, uncertain. He signed, "You don't have to say yes. I know we've probably overstayed." Lena cut him off with a sharp gesture. She signed, "I would love for you to come back. Anytime, seriously." "Tomorrow then," Sophie said decisively. "We'll bring lunch." Lena laughed. "Deal." As Ethan herded the girls toward the door, Lena caught his arm. She signed, "Thank you. For today. For making me feel less alone." Ethan signed back, "You did the same for us." They stood there in the doorway, the cold night air seeping in around them, and Ethan found himself not wanting to leave, not wanting this day to end. "Good night, Lena," he said aloud, signing simultaneously. "Good night, Ethan." The drive home was filled with chatter. The girls recounted every moment of the day, talking over each other, laughing, making plans for tomorrow's visit. Ethan listened with half an ear, his mind elsewhere. He was thinking about Lena's smile, about the way she'd looked at his daughters, not with pity or awkwardness, but with genuine affection, about the photographs of David on her mantle, and the way she'd said she kept them up without shame or apology. She wasn't trying to erase her past. Neither was he. Maybe that was the point. Maybe moving forward didn't mean forgetting. Maybe it just meant making room for something new alongside what had been. Back home, as he tucked the girls into bed, Mila signed, "I really like Lena, Dad." "I know, sweetheart, so do I. I think Mom would have liked her too." Ethan's throat tightened. "Yeah, I think you're right." Mila hugged him fiercely, then pulled back and signed, "It's okay to be happy, Dad. We want you to be." He kissed her forehead, unable to speak past the lump in his throat. Downstairs, he poured himself a glass of whiskey and sat on the couch, staring at the remnants of the morning's gift exchange. Wrapping paper still littered the floor. The Christmas tree lights blinked in a slow, hypnotic rhythm. His phone buzzed. Another message from Lena. "I can't stop smiling. Thank you for the best Christmas I've had in years." Ethan typed back. "Same here. See you tomorrow." "I'm looking forward to it." He set the phone down and allowed himself to smile. Really smile. The kind that reached his eyes and didn't feel weighted with sadness. Tomorrow came, and they returned to Lena's house with sandwiches and soup from a local deli. The day unfolded much like the one before, easy, comfortable, punctuated by laughter and conversation. This pattern continued over the next few days. They'd text in the morning, make plans, and spend the afternoon together. Sometimes at Lena's house, sometimes at Ethan's. The girls were on winter break from school, and Lena worked from home, so the days stretched out long and unhurried. On the third day, Ethan invited Lena to join them for their annual post-Christmas hike. It was a tradition Julia had started, a way to burn off holiday energy and get out of the house. They drove to the state park just outside town, where trails wound through pine forests and along frozen creek beds. The girls ran ahead, their voices echoing through the trees. Ethan and Lena walked side by side, their breath misting in the cold air. "This is beautiful," Lena signed, looking around at the snow-draped landscape. "Julia used to say it was the best way to clear your head after all the holiday chaos," Ethan said, signing as he spoke. "She sounds like she was amazing." "She was." Ethan paused, then added, "But she wasn't perfect. We fought sometimes. She had a temper. She was terrible at keeping track of time. She once burned dinner so badly we had to throw out the pot." Lena laughed. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because I don't want you to think she was some saint. She was real, complicated, human." He looked at Lena. "Like all of us." Lena studied him, her expression thoughtful. "You're afraid of replacing her." It wasn't a question. "Yes," Ethan admitted. "You can't replace someone you love," Lena signed. "You can only make room for someone new. It's not the same thing." "I know that, logically, but emotionally, it's terrifying," Lena finished. "I know, believe me." They walked in silence for a moment, the crunch of snow beneath their boots the only sound. "David was hearing," Lena signed eventually. Most people assumed that meant he was doing me a favor by being with me, like I should be grateful someone normal loved me. Her hands moved sharply, anger coloring the signs. He hated that. We both did. I can imagine, Ethan said. After he died, I wondered if I'd ever find that again. Someone who saw me as a whole person, not a disability or a charity case. She looked at him. And then you showed up. Ethan's heart kicked hard against his ribs. Lena. I'm not saying I'm in love with you, she signed quickly. We barely know each other, but I'm saying I feel seen for the first time in 2 years, and that scares me as much as it excites me. Ethan stopped walking. Ahead of them, the girls had disappeared around a bend in the trail, their laughter still audible but distant. He signed, I feel the same way. Lena's eyes searched his face. So, what do we do? I don't know, Ethan admitted. Take it slow? Slow sounds good. They stood there in the middle of the frozen trail, the winter sun slanting through the trees, and Ethan felt something click into place. Not love, not yet, but the beginning of it, the possibility. Come on, he signed, smiling, before the girls come back looking for us and give us hell for falling behind. Lena laughed and followed him up the trail. That night, after they dropped Lena off and returned home, Ethan's phone rang. Unknown number. He answered cautiously. Hello? Mr. Cole? This is Officer Davidson with the Maple Ridge Police Department. We're at the scene of an accident involving a woman named Lena Moore. We found your number in her phone listed as an emergency contact. Ethan's blood turned to ice. What happened? Is she okay? She's shaken up but not seriously injured. A car slid through a stop sign and clipped her vehicle. She's refusing to go to the hospital, but she seems disoriented and we're having trouble communicating with her. She keeps asking for you. I'm on my way. Where are you? The officer gave him the intersection, less than 2 miles from Lena's house. Ethan grabbed his keys, shouted to the girls that he'd be back soon, and ran to his truck. He found the scene easily. Flashing lights, 2 crumpled cars, officers directing traffic. His heart hammered as he parked and jumped out. Lena was sitting in the back of an ambulance, wrapped in a blanket, her face pale. An officer stood nearby, clearly frustrated, trying to ask her questions. Ethan ran over. Lena! Her head snapped up and relief flooded her face. She signed frantically. Ethan, I couldn't understand them. They kept talking and I couldn't... It's okay, he signed, climbing into the ambulance beside her. I'm here. You're safe. He turned to the officer. I can interpret for her. The officer looked relieved. Thank you. We just need to get some basic information. For the next 20 minutes, Ethan served as the bridge between Lena and the officers, the paramedics, the tow truck driver. He asked her questions, relayed her answers, made sure she understood what was happening. The accident had been minor, a fender bender, really. The other driver had been apologetic, cooperative. Lena's car was drivable, just dented. But the trauma of being unable to communicate, of standing in the cold while people spoke at her, and around her, and about her without including her, had shaken her badly. When the officers finally cleared them to leave, Ethan insisted on driving Lena home. She didn't protest. Inside her house, he made her tea and sat with her on the couch, watching as the adrenaline slowly drained from her system. I hate this, she signed, tears streaming down her face. I hate feeling helpless. You're not helpless, Ethan signed firmly. The system is broken, not you. It's always like this, Lena signed. Doctors, banks, government offices. Everywhere I go, I have to fight to be understood, and I'm so tired of fighting. Ethan took her hands, stilling them. Then let me fight with you. Lena looked at him, vulnerable and raw. Why? Because you shouldn't have to do it alone. He paused. And because I care about you. The words hung in the air between them. Lena's expression softened. She signed, I care about you too. They sat in silence, hands still intertwined, and Ethan realized this was a turning point, not just in their relationship, but in how he understood what it meant to move forward. Loving someone new didn't erase the past. It honored it by choosing to live fully in the present. Stay tonight, Lena signed. Please. I don't want to be alone. I need to get back to the girls, Ethan said, but I can stay until you fall asleep. Lena nodded, grateful. He sat with her until her breathing evened out, until the tension left her shoulders and she drifted off. Then he slipped out quietly, locking the door behind him, and drove home through the dark streets. The girls were still awake, waiting anxiously. Is Lena okay? Sophie asked immediately. She's fine, Ethan assured them, just shaken up. Can we see her tomorrow? Emma asked. I think she'd like that. Mila signed, You love her. It wasn't a question. Ethan opened his mouth to deny it, then stopped. Did he? Maybe. Maybe the seeds of it were there, taking root in the space Julia's death had left behind. I might, he admitted. Mila smiled. Good. That night, lying in bed, Ethan stared at the ceiling and allowed himself to imagine a future he'd thought was impossible. A future where the empty chair stayed empty because it no longer needed to be filled, where memory and hope coexisted, where love came in different forms at different times, and all of it mattered. He reached for his phone and sent Lena a message. Thinking of you, sleep well. The response came a minute later. Thank you for tonight, for everything. I don't know what I would have done without you. Ethan smiled and set the phone down. Outside, snow began to fall again, covering the world in silence. The morning after the accident, Ethan woke to find all three girls already dressed and waiting by the front door, coats on, boots laced. We need to check on Lena, Emma announced before he'd even made it down the stairs. It's 7 a.m, Ethan said, rubbing sleep from his eyes. She's probably still asleep. Then we'll wait, Sophie said with the kind of determination that reminded him painfully of Julia. Mila signed, We're worried about her. Ethan couldn't argue with that. He was worried too. He'd barely slept, his mind replaying the image of Lena sitting in that ambulance, shaking and overwhelmed, unable to make the world understand her. Let me shower first, he said. Then we'll go. 20 minutes later, they were in the truck, a bag of bagels and cream cheese on Sophie's lap. The streets were quiet, the town still waking up from the holiday lull. When they pulled up to Lena's house, Ethan saw her car in the driveway, the passenger side door crumpled inward, a spider web of cracks across the window. Oh no, Sophie whispered. Emma's eyes went wide. It looks worse in daylight. Ethan felt anger simmer in his chest again. The accident had been the other driver's fault, someone running a stop sign, not paying attention. Lena had done nothing wrong, and yet she'd been the one left terrified and voiceless while strangers made decisions around her. He knocked on the door, gentle but insistent. After a moment, it opened. Lena stood there in an oversized sweater and leggings, her hair unbrushed, eyes red-rimmed. When she saw them, her face crumpled. We brought bagels, Emma said, holding up the bag like a peace offering. Lena laughed, a broken sound, and stepped aside to let them in. The morning unfolded quietly. They sat around her kitchen table, eating bagels slathered with too much cream cheese, and Lena slowly came back to herself. The girls chattered about inconsequential things, a movie they wanted to watch, a new game Emma had gotten for Christmas, Sophie's theory about why cats purred, normal things, safe things. Ethan watched Lena watch his daughters, saw the tightness in her shoulders gradually ease. When the girls wandered into the living room to investigate Lena's bookshelf, she turned to Ethan and signed, Thank you for last night. I don't know what I would have done if you hadn't come. You don't have to thank me, Ethan signed back. I wanted to be there. Still, most people wouldn't have. She paused, her hands hesitant. David used to be my voice in situations like that. After he died, I had to learn how to navigate the world alone again. Last night reminded me how exhausting that is. You shouldn't have to do it alone, Ethan said. Lena's eyes met his, searching. Are you offering to be my voice? I'm offering to stand beside you, Ethan signed carefully. Not in front of you, beside you. The distinction mattered. Lena's expression softened, and she reached across the table to touch his hand briefly. That means everything, she signed. From the living room, Mila called out, Lena, do you have the next book in this series? The moment broke, but it didn't disappear. It hung between them, warm and patient. Over the next week, Lena became woven into the fabric of their daily lives. She came to dinner at Ethan's house, where they attempted to make spaghetti and ended up ordering pizza after the pasta turned to mush. She taught Emma advanced techniques for shading and perspective in her drawings. She helped Sophie research veterinary schools, pulling up websites and programs with the efficiency of someone used to gathering information visually. And with Mila, she was something more, a mirror, a kindred spirit. They signed together in rapid conversations that left Ethan struggling to keep up, laughing at jokes only they understood, sharing the particular joy of communicating in a language that felt like home. One afternoon, as Ethan stood in the kitchen watching Lena and Mila debate the merits of different signing styles, Lena preferring the theatrical expressiveness common in deaf theater, Mila arguing for the streamlined efficiency of everyday conversation, he felt a presence beside him. Sophie had appeared silently, her eyes also on the animated discussion happening at the table. "She's good for Mila," Sophie said quietly. "Yeah," Ethan agreed. "She is." "She's good for you too, Dad." Ethan looked down at his daughter. "What makes you say that?" Sophie shrugged. "You smile more. You don't look so tired all the time. And you stopped setting Mom's place at the table." Ethan's breath caught. He hadn't even noticed. When had that happened? When had the ritual that had defined their grief become unnecessary? "Does that bother you?" he asked carefully. Sophie considered this. "No, I think Mom would be happy we don't need to anymore. I think it means we're okay." Ethan pulled her into a hug, overwhelmed by the wisdom of this 10-year-old who had grown up too fast but somehow remained fundamentally kind. "We are okay," he said into her hair. "We really are." That evening, after Lena had gone home and the girls were in bed, Ethan found himself pulling out the photo albums he'd stored in the hall closet 3 years ago. He hadn't looked at them since Julia's funeral. It had hurt too much. But tonight, he opened them. There was Julia on their wedding day, radiant in white lace, laughing at something the photographer had said. Julia pregnant with the triplets, her belly enormous, making a face at the camera. Julia holding 3 tiny red-faced newborns, looking exhausted and exhilarated and terrified all at once. Julia teaching Mila her first signs, patient and focused. Julia in the kitchen, covered in flour, attempting to bake cookies with 3 toddlers. "Julia, Julia, Julia." Ethan traced his finger over her face in one of the photos, a candid shot someone had taken at a barbecue, her head thrown back in laughter, joy radiating from every pixel. "I'm not replacing you," he whispered to the image. "I could never replace you." But he was making room, and that was okay. His phone buzzed. A message from Lena. "Can't sleep, thinking about the accident, about how grateful I am that you were there." Ethan typed back. "Can't sleep either. Want company?" The response was immediate. "Please." He checked on the girls, all 3 sound asleep, and left a note on the kitchen counter in case one of them woke up. Then he drove through the quiet streets to Lena's house. She answered the door in pajamas, her eyes tired but alert. She signed, "You didn't have to come." "I wanted to," Ethan signed back. She led him to the living room, where 2 mugs of tea already sat on the coffee table. They settled on the couch, a careful distance between them, and for a while they just sat in comfortable silence. Finally, Lena signed, "I keep thinking about what would have happened if you hadn't shown up at the accident. I would have been stuck there, unable to explain what happened, unable to understand what people were telling me. They might have forced me to go to the hospital. They might have made decisions for me without my consent." "That won't happen again," Ethan said firmly. "Not while I'm around." "You can't promise that. You can't be everywhere." "No, but I can make sure you have resources. Have you thought about carrying cards that explain you're deaf? Or having a medical alert bracelet?" Lena's expression turned wry. "I have cards. In my wallet, which was locked in my car while I was sitting in the ambulance. And medical alert bracelets feel like advertising my disability, like leading with what's wrong with me." "There's nothing wrong with you," Ethan said sharply. "I know that. You know that. But the world doesn't always agree." Ethan felt frustration building, not at Lena, but at the systematic failures that had led to her standing alone in the cold, invisible. "What if I hired you?" he said suddenly. Lena blinked. "What?" My construction company. We've been growing, taking on bigger projects, commercial buildings, public spaces, and I realized after your accident, we're not thinking about accessibility. Not really. We meet the minimum ADA requirements, but that's it. We need someone who understands what it's like to navigate the world with barriers most people never see. Lena stared at him. You want to hire me as an accessibility consultant? Yes. And not because I feel sorry for you, Ethan added quickly. Because you're qualified. Because you have insight we desperately need. Because I trust you to make our work better. Lena's hands moved slowly, carefully. That's a real job offer? Completely real. I'll pay you fairly, better than fairly, and you can work whatever hours suit you, from home if you want, on site when necessary. Whatever works. Ethan? Lena's eyes were bright with unshed tears. Why are you doing this? Because the world should work for you, not against you, and if I can't change the whole world, I can at least change the buildings I create. Lena set her mug down and moved closer to him on the couch. She signed, You're a good man. I'm just doing what should be normal. It's not, though. That's the point. She hesitated, then signed, Can I tell you something? Anything. When David died, I thought I'd lost my only ally, my only person who truly saw me. And then I met you and your daughters, and I started to believe maybe I could have that again. Not the same. I know it won't be the same, but something real, something lasting. Ethan's heart hammered in his chest. Lena, I'm falling for you, she signed, her hands trembling slightly. I didn't want to. I tried not to. But I am. The words hung in the air between them, terrifying and exhilarating. Ethan reached out and gently took her hands, stilling them. I'm falling for you too. They sat there, hands clasped, the truth finally spoken. I'm scared, Lena signed when he released her hands. Me too. What if we mess this up? What if I'm not what you need? What if... Ethan leaned forward and kissed her. It was gentle, questioning, full of promise. Lena made a small surprised sound and then melted into him, her hands coming up to frame his face. When they pulled apart, both breathing hard, Ethan signed, We'll figure it out. Together. Lena smiled, radiant and tentative. Together. They stayed on the couch for hours, talking and kissing and mapping out the uncertain territory of whatever this was becoming. Ethan told her about his fears, that he'd never love anyone the way he'd loved Julia, that his daughters would feel betrayed, that he'd fail Lena in some fundamental way. Lena shared her own anxieties, that she'd always be a burden, that communication barriers would eventually drive them apart, that she was too broken to build something new. You're not broken, Ethan signed fiercely. You're whole, completely whole. So are you, Lena signed back. Even with all your grief and fear, you're whole. They fell asleep on the couch, wrapped around each other, and woke at dawn to Ethan's phone ringing insistently. It was Emma. Dad? Where are you? Your note says you went out, but you didn't say where, and it's morning now, and we're worried. Ethan sat up, careful not to disturb Lena. I'm at Lena's. I'm sorry, sweetie. I should have been more specific. I'll be home in 20 minutes. Oh. A pause. Are you and Lena... We're figuring things out, Ethan said carefully. Good. We like her. Don't mess it up. Despite everything, Ethan laughed. I'll try not to. When he hung up, Lena was awake, watching him with sleepy eyes. He signed, The girls know I'm here. They approve, apparently. Lena smiled. Of course they do. They're smart kids. The smartest. He kissed her once more, soft and sweet, and then reluctantly pulled away. I need to get home. But I'll call you later? You better. The drive home felt different, lighter, like the world had shifted on its axis and settled into a new, better position. When he walked through the front door, all three girls were waiting in the kitchen, eating cereal and trying very hard to look casual. Morning, Dad, Sophie said, overly bright. Morning. So, Emma said, drawing out the word. Lena's house. Interesting choice for a midnight visit. Ethan poured himself coffee, buying time. We were talking. Uh-huh. Emma exchanged glances with her sisters. Mila signed, Are you dating her? Ethan set down his mug and looked at his daughters, these three fierce, perceptive souls who had been through so much and somehow emerged kind and whole. "Yes," he said, signing simultaneously. "We're dating, if that's okay with you." The reaction was instantaneous. Emma whooped. Sophie grinned. Mila signed, "Finally!" "Finally?" Ethan repeated. "It's been a week." "A week of you two making eyes at each other and dancing around it," Emma said. "We were starting to think we'd have to lock you in a room together." "We were not making eyes." "Dad," Sophie interrupted, "you absolutely were." Ethan felt his face heat. "Well, okay, but this is new, and we're taking it slow, and we're happy for you," Mila signed, cutting through his rambling. "We want you to be happy. We want Lena to be happy. And you're happy together." Ethan's throat tightened. "You're sure? Because if this is too much, too fast—" "Dad?" Emma's voice was uncharacteristically serious. "Mom's gone. We miss her every day. But that doesn't mean you have to be alone forever. Lena's good. She's good for you. She's good for us. So please, just let yourself have this." Ethan pulled all three of them into a hug, overwhelmed by their grace and understanding. "I love you three so much," he said, his voice rough. "We know," Sophie said into his shoulder. "We love you too." That afternoon, Lena came over for what Ethan had planned as a casual conversation about the consulting job. Instead, it turned into an impromptu celebration. The girls had made a banner that read, "Welcome to the family," in colorful markers and hung it across the living room. Lena stood in the doorway, staring at it, tears streaming down her face. Emma rushed over and hugged her. "You're stuck with us now." "I think I can live with that," Lena signed, laughing and crying at the same time. They spent the rest of the day planning. Ethan pulled out blueprints for the company's current projects, and Lena examined them with a critical eye, pointing out accessibility issues he'd never considered. Doorways too narrow for wheelchairs, bathrooms without proper grab bars, signage at heights that would be difficult for people in wheelchairs to read, visual fire alarms missing for deaf occupants, an entire world of barriers hiding in plain sight. "This is what I mean," Lena signed. "You meet code, but code is the bare minimum. What about excellence?" Ethan felt simultaneously chastened and energized. "Show me. Teach me. Make us better." Lena smiled. "Deal." As the sun set, Sophie asked the question that had been hovering unspoken all day. "So what are you two, like, officially?" Ethan looked at Lena. Lena looked at Ethan. He signed, "What do you want to be?" Lena signed back, "I want to be yours, if you'll have me." "I'll have you," Ethan signed, his heart full to bursting. "In whatever way you'll let me." They'd figure out the labels later. For now, this was enough. More than enough. That night, after Lena had gone home and the girls were asleep, Ethan stood in the doorway of the dining room, looking at the table where they ate every meal. 6 chairs. No empty spaces. No ghosts. Julia's memory lived in other places now, in the photo albums he could finally look at without breaking, in the stories he told the girls about their mother, in the values she'd instilled that guided them still. But not in absence, not in emptiness. He pulled out his phone and sent Lena a message. "Thank you for filling the space in our lives. Not the space Julia left. That's hers and always will be. But the space we didn't know we needed filled. The space that's just for you." Her response came quickly. "Thank you for seeing me, for making room, for being brave enough to try again. I didn't think I'd ever have this. I didn't think I deserved it." "You deserve everything," Ethan typed, "and I'm going to spend as long as you'll let me proving that to you." "That might be a very long time." "Good." Ethan smiled and set the phone down. Outside, snow had started falling again, blanketing the world in quiet white. Inside, the house was warm and full and alive. He thought about the restaurant on Christmas Eve, about the woman in the red dress standing alone in the cold, about the split-second decision to cross a crowded room and offer a hand. That moment had changed everything, not because it was grand or dramatic, but because it was human. One person seeing another and choosing connection over indifference. Ethan climbed the stairs to check on the girls one last time before bed. Emma was sprawled across her mattress, covers kicked off, her sketchbook open on the floor beside her. Sophie slept curled in a tight ball, her veterinary book stacked neatly on the nightstand. Mila lay on her back, hands resting on her stomach, peaceful in the silence that was her constant companion. He kissed each of their foreheads, pulled blankets up, turned off lights. In his own room, he looked at the photograph on his nightstand, Julia smiling at the camera, wind in her hair, joy in her eyes. He picked it up, studying her face. "I hope you're okay with this," he whispered. "I hope you know I'm not forgetting you. I'm choosing to live, like you would have wanted." The photo didn't answer, of course, but in the quiet of the room, Ethan felt something like peace. He set the frame back down, climbed into bed, and let himself imagine the future. Not in specific details, but in feelings, laughter, connection, love that honored the past while embracing the present, a table full of people who chose each other, again and again. His phone buzzed one last time. A message from Lena. "Good night, Ethan. Sweet dreams." He smiled and typed back. "Good night, Lena. See you tomorrow." Tomorrow, and the day after that, and the day after that. For the first time in 3 years, tomorrow felt like a promise instead of a threat. Ethan closed his eyes and let sleep take him, his last conscious thought a simple truth. Sometimes the greatest act of love is allowing yourself to love again. The weeks that followed took on a rhythm that felt both natural and miraculous. Lena began consulting for Ethan's company in earnest, arriving at job sites with her tablet and measuring tape, her keen eye catching details that had been invisible to everyone else. She redesigned bathroom layouts to accommodate wheelchairs without sacrificing aesthetics. She advocated for visual alerts in addition to audible ones. She pushed for automatic doors, wider hallways, better lighting in stairwells. Ethan's crew was skeptical at first. Big Joe, his lead foreman, had been in construction for 30 years and didn't appreciate being told his work was incomplete. "We meet every code requirement," Joe said, his arms crossed over his broad chest as he looked at Lena's proposed changes to the community center they were building. "This is just adding expense." Lena couldn't hear him, but she could read his body language. She looked at Ethan, waiting. Ethan signed what Joe had said, and Lena's expression hardened. She pulled out her phone, typed quickly, and showed Joe the screen. "Meeting code is like getting a D on a test. You passed, but barely. Do you want your legacy to be buildings that barely accommodate people? Or buildings that welcome everyone?" Joe read the message, his jaw working. He looked at Lena, then at Ethan, then back at the blueprints. "Fine," he said gruffly, "but if this project goes over budget—" "It won't," Lena typed. "I'll make sure of it." She was true to her word. Lena found cost-effective solutions, negotiated with suppliers, and somehow managed to improve accessibility while keeping the project on track. Within a month, even Joe was asking for her input before breaking ground on new builds. "She's got a good eye," Joe admitted to Ethan one afternoon, watching as Lena explained proper ramp gradients to one of the younger crew members. "And she doesn't take any crap." Ethan smiled. "No, she doesn't." "You two are together, right?" Ethan felt heat creep up his neck. Word had clearly gotten around the job sites. "Yeah, we are," Joe nodded approvingly. "Good. She's good people. And you've been alone long enough." It was perhaps the most emotional thing Ethan had ever heard Joe say. "Thanks, Joe." "Just don't screw it up," Joe added, walking away. "We need her on this crew." At home, Lena became part of the family's fabric in ways both obvious and subtle. She joined them for Friday movie nights, signing commentary during the films that made the girls laugh. She taught Emma how to see the world through a designer's eyes, pointing out colors and compositions everywhere they went. She helped Sophie build a model of a veterinary clinic, complete with accessible features. And with Mila, she continued to be a mirror and a mentor, someone who understood the particular joy and frustration of navigating a hearing world as a deaf person. One Saturday morning, Ethan woke to find Lena already in his kitchen, making pancakes with all 3 girls. They were laughing at something, flour dusting every surface, and the scene was so domestic, so right, that it made his chest ache. Mila saw him first and signed, "Lena's teaching us to make them shaped like animals." "I can see that," Ethan signed back, looking at the misshapen blob currently on the griddle. What animal is that supposed to be? A turtle, Emma said indignantly. Obviously. Obviously, Ethan agreed, biting back a smile. Lena turned and saw him, her face lighting up. She signed, "Good morning. We're making a mess." "I can see that too." "Want coffee?" she signed, already reaching for a mug. "Please." As she poured, their hands brushed, and Ethan felt the now familiar spark of connection. They'd been taking things slow, mindful of the girls, mindful of their own healing, but the pull between them was undeniable. Later, after the girls had devoured their animal-shaped pancakes and scattered to various corners of the house, Ethan and Lena sat at the kitchen table, hands wrapped around coffee mugs. "I need to tell you something," Lena signed, her expression serious. Ethan's stomach clenched. "Okay. My lease is up next month. My landlord is selling the house. I need to find a new place." Relief flooded through him. Not bad news, just logistics. "Have you started looking?" "A little. But everything I can afford is either too far from your office or in neighborhoods that don't feel safe." She paused. "I was thinking about moving closer to downtown. There are some new apartment buildings going up that look accessible." Ethan's mind raced. He thought about the empty guest room upstairs, the one that had become a storage space for boxes and forgotten furniture. He thought about how much time Lena already spent here, how seamlessly she'd integrated into their lives. "You could move in here," he said aloud, signing simultaneously. Lena's eyes went wide. "What?" "Move in, with us. We have the space. The girls adore you, and I—" He faltered, then pushed forward. "I want you here." Lena set down her mug carefully. She signed, "Ethan, we've been together for 6 weeks." "I know." "That's fast, really fast." "I know that too." Ethan reached across the table and took her hands. "But I also know that I'm 40 years old, and I've already learned that life is short and unpredictable. I know what I feel, I know what I want, and I want you here, in this house, part of this family, not as a guest, as someone who belongs." Lena's eyes filled with tears. "What if it doesn't work? What if we move too fast and everything falls apart?" "Then we'll deal with it, together." Ethan squeezed her hands. "But I don't think that's going to happen. Do you?" Lena looked around the kitchen, at the artwork the girls had stuck to the refrigerator, at the calendar on the wall marked with soccer practices and school events, at the everyday chaos of a family's life. Then she looked back at Ethan. "No," she signed, "I don't think it will." "So?" She smiled through her tears. "I need to think about it, and we need to talk to the girls." "They'll say yes before you finish asking." "Probably," Lena agreed, "but we should still ask." They talked to the girls that evening. Ethan had barely finished explaining the situation when Emma jumped up from the couch, shrieking with joy. "You're moving in, like for real, forever?" "Well, not forever necessarily." Lena started to sign. "Forever," Mila interrupted firmly. "You're not allowed to leave." Sophie, more measured than her sisters, asked the practical questions. "Where will you sleep? Will you share a room with Dad? Can I still come talk to you at night when I have bad dreams?" Lena signed carefully. "I'll have my own room for now. And yes, you can always come talk to me, day or night." "Okay then," Sophie said. "I think it's a good idea." Emma grabbed Lena in a fierce hug. "This is the best thing that's happened since—" She trailed off, suddenly aware of what she'd been about to say. Lena gently extricated herself and signed to Emma. "It's okay. You can talk about your mom. She was important. She still is." Emma nodded, relief washing over her face. That night, after the girls had gone to bed still buzzing with excitement, Ethan and Lena sat on the porch despite the cold, wrapped in blankets, watching their breath mist in the air. "Are you sure about this?" Lena signed. "Really sure?" "Completely. Your crew is going to have opinions." "Joe already likes you better than me," Lena laughed. "What about your friends, your family?" Ethan sobered. "My parents passed away years ago. Julia's parents. They've been distant since she died. I think it hurts them too much to be around the girls. They look too much like her." "That's sad," Lena signed. "It is. But we've built our own family. The girls, me, and now you." Lena leaned her head on his shoulder. I never thought I'd have this. After David died, I thought I was done. That I'd just exist, get through each day, but this is living. Ethan kissed the top of her head. Yeah, it is. Moving day arrived 2 weeks later, and it was controlled chaos. Lena didn't have much furniture. Most of it had been David's, and she'd slowly sold or donated it over the past 2 years, finding it too painful to keep. What she did have were boxes of design equipment, books, clothes, and memories. The girls threw themselves into helping, each taking charge of different aspects. Emma decorated Lena's new room with welcome signs and fresh flowers. Sophie organized the closet with military precision. Mila helped unpack boxes, sorting items, and asking questions about every photograph, every memento. "Who's this?" Mila asked, holding up a photo of Lena and David at the Grand Canyon. Lena took the photo gently. She signed, "That's David. We went there for our 10th anniversary. He was afraid of heights, but he hiked to the bottom with me anyway." "He looks nice," Mila signed. "He was. Very nice." "Do you still miss him?" Lena sat down on the edge of the bed, and Mila sat beside her. "Every day. But it doesn't hurt the same way it used to. Now it's more like he's a beautiful memory instead of an open wound." Mila nodded solemnly. "That's how I feel about Mom now. It used to hurt all the time. Now it only hurts sometimes. Is that okay?" "That's very okay," Lena signed. "It means you're healing." "Does loving Dad mean you don't love David anymore?" Lena's eyes widened. She signed carefully. "No, sweetie. Love isn't like that. It doesn't run out or replace itself. I still love David. I always will. But I also love your dad. They're different loves, both real, both important." Mila considered this. "Good. Because I love Mom, and I love you, and I didn't want to choose." Lena pulled Mila into a hug, overcome. By evening, most of Lena's belongings were unpacked and integrated into the house. Her design equipment set up in the corner of the dining room, her books on the shelves alongside the girls' novels and Ethan's construction manuals, her jackets hanging by the door next to everyone else's. They ordered Chinese food and ate it straight from the containers, sprawled across the living room floor, exhausted and happy. "I can't believe you live here now," Emma said, mouth full of lo mein. "Believe it," Lena signed. "Are you going to marry Dad?" Sophie asked suddenly. The room went very quiet. Ethan choked on his fried rice. Lena's eyes went wide. "Sophie?" Ethan managed. "What? It's a reasonable question." Lena set down her container carefully. She signed, "Your dad and I haven't talked about that. We're taking things one step at a time." "But you want to, right?" Emma pressed. "Girls," Ethan said firmly, "that's enough." But Lena touched his arm. She signed to the girls, "I care about your dad very much, and I care about all of you. Where this goes, we'll figure that out together. All of us. Okay?" The girls nodded, satisfied for now. Later, after they'd cleaned up and the girls had reluctantly gone to bed, Ethan found Lena standing in her new room, looking around at the space that was now hers. "You okay?" he signed. She turned to him, smiling. "More than okay. This is the first place that's felt like home since David died." Ethan crossed to her, gathering her into his arms. "I'm glad you're here." "Me too." They stood like that for a long moment, just holding each other. Then Lena pulled back enough to sign, "About what the girls asked." "You don't have to." "I want to." She took a breath. "I do want to marry you. Eventually. When we're both ready. When it feels right." Ethan's heart kicked hard against his ribs. "Yeah?" "Yeah," she smiled. "But not yet. Let's just be for a while. Let's build this life together and see where it goes." "I can work with that," Ethan signed. He kissed her then, slow and deep, and when they broke apart, both of them were breathless. "Good night," Lena signed reluctantly. "Good night." Ethan forced himself to leave her room to walk down the hall to his own. They'd agreed to take the physical side of their relationship slowly, mindful of the girls, mindful of their own complicated grief. But it was getting harder to maintain that boundary. He lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, and thought about the future, about waking up every morning knowing Lena was down the hall. about building a life that honored both Julia and David while creating something entirely new. His phone lit up with a message. Thank you for giving me a home, not just a place to live, a real home. L. Ethan smiled and typed back, thank you for filling it with life again. Sleep well. You too. The next few weeks were an adjustment. Lena had her own routines, her own rhythms, and they didn't always mesh perfectly with the family's established patterns. She was a night owl who did her best design work after midnight. She was meticulously organized in some areas and chaotically scattered in others. She had strong opinions about everything from how to load the dishwasher to what constituted appropriate breakfast food. There were small conflicts. Lena got frustrated when Ethan left dirty dishes in the sink. Ethan got annoyed when Lena rearranged the furniture without asking. They had their first real argument over something absurdly trivial, whether to keep the living room curtains open or closed during the day. I need natural light for my work, Lena signed, her hands sharp with irritation. And I need privacy from the neighbors, Ethan signed back. They can see right in. So let them see, we're not doing anything wrong. That's not the point. They stood in the living room glaring at each other, and suddenly the absurdity of it hit Ethan. They were fighting about curtains, actual curtains. He started to laugh. Lena's eyes narrowed. Are you laughing at me? I'm laughing at us. We're fighting about curtains. A smile tugged at Lena's lips. We are, aren't we? We could compromise, open during the day, closed at night. Lena considered this. That's acceptable. They came together in the middle of the room, and Ethan pulled her close. Our first fight, he signed against her shoulder. About curtains, Lena signed back. I think we're going to be okay. I think so too. But not every conflict was so easily resolved. 2 months after Lena moved in, Ethan came home from a particularly brutal day at work to find the house in chaos. The girls were screaming at each other upstairs. Something was burning in the kitchen, and Lena sat at the dining room table, her head in her hands, looking defeated. Ethan dealt with the girls first, a fight over a borrowed shirt that had escalated beyond all reason. Then he turned off the stove where dinner had been forgotten and was now a charred mess. Finally, he sat down next to Lena. Bad day? He signed. She looked up at him, tears streaming down her face. I can't do this. Ethan's stomach dropped. Can't do what? This. Be a parent. I'm not their mother. I don't know how to handle them when they fight. I don't know the rules, the routines. I ruined dinner and I couldn't hear the smoke alarm and I feel like I'm failing at everything. Ethan took her hands. You're not failing. You're learning. We all are. You don't understand. I can't hear when something's wrong. The smoke alarm, the girls fighting upstairs. I didn't know until I saw the smoke. What if there's a real emergency? What if I miss something critical? Then we install visual alerts, Ethan signed. Flashing lights for the smoke alarm, a monitoring system that sends alerts to your phone. We adapt. We make this house work for you. You shouldn't have to do all that. Why not? This is your home. It should be accessible to you. Lena wiped her eyes. What about the girls? I don't have the authority to discipline them. I'm not their mother. No, you're not, Ethan agreed gently. But you're part of this family. That gives you authority. The girls know that. They respect you. Do they? Or are they just being polite? Ethan smiled. Trust me, if they didn't respect you, they wouldn't be polite. We need to talk to them. Set clear expectations about your role here. But Lena, you're not failing. You're doing exactly what every parent does, trying your best and learning as you go. Lena took a shaky breath. Okay, can we order pizza? I clearly can't be trusted with cooking tonight. Pizza sounds perfect. They talked to the girls that evening after the immediate crisis had passed. Ethan explained that Lena needed their help, that she couldn't always hear when things went wrong, and they needed to be her eyes and ears. The girls, chastened by their earlier behavior, agreed immediately. We can put sticky notes on our doors, Mila suggested. Green means we're okay, red means we need help. That's brilliant, Lena signed. They spent the rest of the evening brainstorming solutions. Visual alerts, communication systems, clear rules about checking in. By bedtime, everyone felt better. As Ethan tucked Mila into bed, she signed, Is Lena okay? She is now. Today was hard for her. Because she's deaf? Partly, but also because blending families is complicated. There's a learning curve. Mila nodded thoughtfully. I think she's doing great. For what it's worth. I'll tell her you said that. Dad? Mila's hands moved hesitantly. I'm glad she's here. I know it's different from when Mom was here, but it's good different. Ethan's eyes stung. Yeah, sweetheart. It is. Downstairs, he found Lena installing a visual smoke alarm she'd apparently ordered earlier that day. She looked up when he entered, signing, I'm not going to be caught off guard again. The girls wanted me to tell you they think you're doing great. Lena's expression softened. They're good kids. The best. Ethan crossed to her, helping her finish the installation. We're going to figure this out, all of us, together. I know, I just had a moment of panic. You're allowed those. I have them regularly. They finished with the smoke alarm, tested it with the lights flashing bright and urgent, and then collapsed on the couch together. I love you. Ethan signed suddenly. Lena's eyes widened. They hadn't said it yet, not officially. You don't have to say it back, Ethan continued quickly. I just needed you to know. Lena cupped his face in her hands. I love you too. Even on the hard days, especially on the hard days. They kissed, and it felt like a promise, like a covenant. They would fight and struggle and mess up, but they would do it together. And that made all the difference. Spring arrived, bringing with it longer days and a sense of renewal. Ethan's business was thriving, thanks in large part to Lena's innovations. They'd completed 3 major projects, all of which had received praise for their accessibility features. Other companies were starting to call, asking if they could hire Lena as a consultant. You should do it, Ethan told her one evening as they reviewed the requests. Start your own consulting firm. You're good at this. Really good. You think I'm ready? Lena signed. I know you are. Within a month, Lena had launched her own business. She called it Accessible Futures, and her client list grew rapidly. She was doing what she'd always dreamed of, making the world more navigable for people like her, one building at a time. Watching her thrive filled Ethan with fierce pride. This was the woman he loved, competent, passionate, unwilling to settle for less than excellence. One Saturday in May, they took the girls to the same state park where they'd hiked months before. The trails were muddy from recent rain, and wildflowers bloomed in unexpected places. As they walked, Emma chattering about a school project, Sophie identifying bird calls, and Mila and Lena signing about a deaf theater production they wanted to see, Ethan felt contentment settle deep in his bones. This was his family, not the one he'd started with, but the one he'd built from grief and hope and stubborn love. They stopped at a clearing overlooking the valley, and Lena turned to him, signing, What are you thinking about? How lucky I am, Ethan signed back. We're the lucky ones, Lena corrected. And maybe they both were. Summer slipped into fall, and the girls returned to school with new confidence and energy. Mila landed the lead role in her deaf theater production, a modern adaptation of a classic fairy tale performed entirely in American Sign Language. Sophie joined the Junior Veterinary Club and spent her weekends volunteering at the local animal shelter. Emma's artwork began appearing in school showcases, her style evolving into something distinctly her own. And through it all, Lena was there, not as a replacement for what they'd lost, but as something entirely her own. She attended Mila's rehearsals, helped Sophie practice animal handling techniques, and spent hours with Emma discussing color theory and composition. Ethan watched his family expand and thrive, and for the first time since Julia's death, he felt whole. But there was still one conversation they hadn't had. One question that hung unspoken between him and Lena, growing heavier with each passing month. It was Big Joe who finally pushed him to address it. They were on site at a new medical complex, reviewing the accessibility features Lena had designed when Joe pulled Ethan aside. You gonna marry her or what? Joe asked bluntly. Ethan nearly dropped his coffee. What? Don't play dumb. You've been together almost a year. She lives in your house. Your kids call her family. Either you're serious about this or you're wasting her time. I am serious, Ethan said defensively. Then why hasn't she got a ring on her finger? Ethan didn't have a good answer. Fear, maybe. Grief that still occasionally ambushed him. the lingering worry that moving forward meant abandoning Julia's memory. I thought so, Joe said, reading his silence. Look, I knew Julia. She was good people. But she's gone, Ethan. And you've got a second chance at happiness standing right there. He nodded toward Lena, who was explaining something to one of the contractors, her hands moving expressively. Don't screw it up by hesitating too long. That night, Ethan couldn't stop thinking about Joe's words. He watched Lena help the girls with homework, laughing at their jokes, correcting their sign language grammar with gentle patience. He thought about waking up next to her every morning, about building a future together, about making permanent what had started as a chance encounter in a restaurant doorway. He wanted to marry her. He'd wanted it for months. But the logistics felt overwhelming. How did you propose to someone who was deaf? How did you make it special, meaningful, accessible? And what about the girls? Did he ask them first? Did he involve them in the proposal? The question spiraled until Lena noticed his distraction. She signed, "You've been quiet all evening. What's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong," Ethan signed back. "Just thinking." "About?" "The future." Lena's expression grew serious. She took his hand, leading him out to the back porch where they could talk privately. The October air was crisp, leaves crunching underfoot. She signed, "Talk to me. What's going on in your head?" Ethan took a breath. "Do you see a future with us? Long term?" "Of course I do. Don't you?" "Yes, absolutely. I don't know how to navigate this. You and me, the girls, Julia's memory. How do we honor the past while building something new?" Lena sat down on the porch steps, and Ethan joined her. She signed, "You're still afraid of replacing her." "Not exactly. It's more like I'm afraid of forgetting, of letting her fade." "She won't fade," Lena signed firmly. "The girls won't let her. You won't let her. I won't let her. Julia is part of who you are, who they are. She's woven into this family. Marrying me doesn't erase that." Ethan's breath caught. "Marrying you?" Lena's eyes widened, and she laughed. "Did I just accidentally propose?" "I think you did." "Well, that's embarrassing," she signed quickly, flustered. "I didn't mean to steal your thunder. If you were planning us—" Ethan kissed her, cutting off her rambling hands. When he pulled back, he signed, "I was planning something, but your version works too." "So is that a yes?" Lena signed, her hands trembling slightly. "That depends." "Are you actually asking?" Lena took his hands in hers, her expression turning serious. She signed slowly, deliberately. "Ethan Cole, will you marry me?" Ethan felt tears prick his eyes. "Yes. Absolutely yes." They kissed again, longer this time, and when they broke apart, both of them were crying and laughing at the same time. "We should tell the girls," Lena signed. "Probably, although I think they'll say they saw this coming a mile away." They were right. When they gathered the girls in the living room and shared the news, the reaction was instantaneous chaos. Emma screamed with joy. Sophie burst into tears. Mila signed, "Finally," so emphatically she nearly knocked over a lamp. "We've been waiting forever," Emma said, throwing her arms around Lena. "It's been less than a year," Ethan protested. "Exactly. Forever." Emma pulled back, her face suddenly serious. "Can we call you Mom, or is that weird?" The room went quiet. Lena's eyes filled with tears. She signed, "You can call me whatever feels right to you. I'm not trying to replace your mother, but if you want to call me Mom, I would be honored." "What about Mama Lena?" Sophie suggested. "That way it's different from Mom, but still shows you're our parent?" Lena nodded, unable to speak past the lump in her throat. Mila signed, "I like that. Mama Lena and Mom. Both important. Both loved." The distinction felt right. A way to honor Julia's irreplaceable role while acknowledging Lena's present and future in their lives. That night, after the girls had finally calmed down and gone to bed, still buzzing with excitement, Ethan and Lena sat together on the couch, planning. "When should we do it?" Lena signed. "The wedding?" "I don't need anything big," Ethan signed back. "Just us, the girls, people we love." "What about the restaurant? Where we met?" Ethan's heart squeezed. "Really? It feels right. Full circle. The place where everything started." "I love that idea." They decided on a spring wedding, giving them 6 months to plan. Lena wanted simplicity, no elaborate ceremony, no unnecessary formality, just a celebration of the family they'd built and the future they were choosing together. Winter arrived, and with it came their first Christmas together as an engaged couple. This year, when they went to Hartwell's Bistro on Christmas Eve, they requested the same table where they'd first met. The hostess, a different woman than the one who'd turned Lena away a year ago, seated them with a warm smile. The girls were older now, more sophisticated in their tastes. Emma ordered the lobster mac and cheese she'd coveted the year before. Sophie got the fanciest salad on the menu. Mila chose something complex in French that she couldn't quite pronounce. And there were 6 chairs, all filled. No ghosts, no emptiness. Just family. Midway through dinner, Ethan excused himself. He returned a moment later with the restaurant manager, who was carrying something covered in a cloth. "What's going on?" Lena signed suspiciously. Ethan just smiled. The manager removed the cloth, revealing a small brass plaque mounted on a wooden base. It read, "At this table, on Christmas Eve, a family found each other. December 24th, 2025. Lena's hands flew to her mouth. The manager explained that he'd heard their story, how Ethan had invited a stranger to share their table, how that moment had changed their lives. The restaurant wanted to commemorate it. "We'll put it on the table as a permanent marker," the manager said, speaking slowly so Lena could read his lips. "A reminder that kindness matters, that connection matters." Lena was crying too hard to sign. Ethan pulled her close, and the girls gathered around, all of them wrapped in this moment of recognition and gratitude. When they finally composed themselves, Emma raised her glass of sparkling cider. "To family, the one we're born into and the one we choose." Everyone clinked glasses, even the manager, who'd been moved enough to join them. The weeks leading up to the wedding passed in a blur of preparation and anticipation. Lena designed the invitations herself, elegant, simple, incorporating both written English and stylized ASL hand shapes. They hired an ASL interpreter for the hearing guests and made sure all the visual elements of the ceremony would be accessible to the deaf community members Lena invited. The girls threw themselves into wedding planning with enthusiasm that occasionally bordered on overwhelming. Emma designed the programs. Sophie researched flower meanings and created centerpieces. Mila choreographed a special ASL performance for the reception. Ethan's contribution was simpler but no less meaningful. He spent weeks crafting a wooden arbor for the ceremony, carving details into it that represented both families. Magnolias for Julia, who'd loved them. Cherry blossoms for David, who'd proposed to Lena under a cherry tree, and oak leaves for strength and endurance. 2 weeks before the wedding, Ethan received an unexpected phone call. "Mr. Cole, this is Margaret Fletcher. I'm Julia's mother." Ethan's stomach dropped. He hadn't heard from Julia's parents in over a year. They'd slowly withdrawn after her death, the pain of seeing the girls too acute to bear regularly. "Mrs. Fletcher, how are you? We heard about your engagement through mutual friends." Her voice was tight, controlled. "I wanted to reach out before the wedding." "Okay," Ethan said cautiously. "Are you really getting married to someone new?" There it was, the judgment he'd been half expecting, half dreading. "Yes, her name is Lena. I know who she is. I know all about her." Margaret's voice cracked. "And I know I have no right to say anything. We haven't been there. We abandoned you and the girls when you needed us most. But Ethan, I need to know, are you forgetting Julia?" Ethan's anger flared, hot and immediate. "How dare you ask me that? How dare you disappear for years and then question how I'm honoring my wife's memory?" "I'm sorry. I'm saying this wrong." Margaret took a shaky breath. "I'm not questioning you. I'm questioning myself. If you can move forward, if you can find happiness again, why can't we? Why are we still so stuck?" The anger drained away, replaced by understanding. Because grief is different for everyone. There's no timeline, no right way. "Do you still love her, Julia?" "Every single day," Ethan said quietly. "But I also love Lena, not instead of Julia, alongside her. Because Julia taught me how to love fully, and I'm honoring that by loving again." Margaret was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke again, her voice was thick with tears. "Could we come? To the wedding?" I know we don't deserve to be there, but we'd like to meet Lena and see the girls. We've missed so much." Ethan thought about Julia, about what she would have wanted. She'd loved her parents, despite their flaws. She would have wanted them to be part of the girls' lives. "Yes," he said. "You can come. The girls would love to see you." The call ended with tentative plans and fragile hope. When Ethan told Lena about it that night, she signed, "How do you feel about them coming?" "Nervous, but good. The girls need their grandparents, and Margaret's right. We've all been stuck in different ways. Maybe the wedding can be a new beginning for all of us." "I'd like to meet them," Lena signed. "Hear stories about Julia, learn more about who she was." "You're not worried? About being compared to her?" Lena shook her head. "I'm not in competition with a ghost. Julia was important. She shaped you, shaped the girls. I want to understand her better. It'll help me understand all of you." Ethan pulled her close, overwhelmed once again by her grace and wisdom. The wedding day arrived with perfect spring weather, sunshine streaming through clouds, cherry blossoms drifting on the breeze. They'd reserved the entire restaurant for the afternoon, transforming it into a space that felt both elegant and intimate. Julia's parents arrived early, nervous and unsure. Ethan watched as they saw the girls for the first time in months, watched their faces crumple with regret and love. Emma, Sophie, and Mila ran to them without hesitation, hugging them fiercely. Margaret looked up at Ethan over the girls' heads, mouthing, "Thank you." When Margaret and Robert finally met Lena, there was a moment of tension. Margaret studied Lena's face, taking in the woman who would become part of their granddaughters' lives. Then Margaret signed, haltingly, unpracticed, "Thank you for loving them." Lena's eyes widened in surprise. She signed back, "Thank you for sharing them with me." Margaret pulled Lena into an unexpected hug, both women crying, and Ethan felt something inside him release. This was what healing looked like. Messy, imperfect, but real. The ceremony itself was brief and beautiful. Ethan and Lena stood under the wooden arbor he'd built, surrounded by 50 of their closest friends and family. Mila served as the sign language interpreter for the ceremony, translating the officiant's words with practiced ease. When it came time for vows, Ethan spoke and signed simultaneously, his voice steady despite the emotions threatening to overwhelm him. "Lena, a year ago, I was a man going through the motions of life without really living. And then you walked into that restaurant and everything changed. You taught me that love isn't a finite resource, that honoring the past doesn't mean abandoning the future, that compassion and courage can rebuild what grief has broken. I promise to stand beside you, not in front of you, to be your partner, your advocate, your biggest supporter, to build a life with you that makes room for everyone we've loved and lost, while celebrating everything we've found. I love you, completely, forever." Lena's vows were signed, and Mila voiced them for the hearing guests. "Ethan, when I walked into that restaurant, I was prepared to spend the rest of my life alone. I thought I'd had my chance at love, at family, at belonging. And then you saw me, really saw me. Not my disability, not my grief, just me. You and your beautiful daughters gave me a second chance at everything I thought I'd lost. You taught me that family isn't always about blood or biology. It's about who shows up, who stays, who chooses you every single day. I promise to love you fiercely, to love your daughters, our daughters, with everything I have, to honor Julia's memory by living the values she instilled in this family, to never stop fighting for a world that's more accessible, more compassionate, more inclusive. I love you, with my whole heart, always." There wasn't a dry eye in the restaurant. When the officiant pronounced them married, Ethan kissed his wife, and the room erupted in applause and cheers. The reception was exactly what they'd hoped for: food, laughter, dancing, and love. Mila performed her ASL choreography to a song about new beginnings, and it was so moving that several guests asked for the performance to be repeated. The girls gave a joint speech that was equal parts hilarious and touching, sharing stories about how Lena had become essential to their family. Margaret and Robert sat with Julia's old friends, sharing memories and photographs, keeping her alive in the stories they told. And when Margaret showed Lena pictures of Julia with the girls as babies, Lena listened with genuine interest, asking questions, learning about the woman whose legacy she was helping to carry forward. Late in the evening, as the party was winding down, Ethan found himself standing by the window, looking out at the street where he'd first chased after Lena in the snow. Big Joe appeared beside him, holding a beer. "You did good, kid. Thanks for pushing me to do this," Ethan said. "Didn't push, just reminded you what you already knew." Joe clinked his bottle against Ethan's glass. "Julia would be proud of you, of how you've taken care of those girls, of how you've let yourself live again." "I hope so. I know so. She was all about living fully, and that's exactly what you're doing." As the last guest filtered out, Ethan and Lena stood at the same table where they'd first shared a meal. The brass plaque gleamed in the candlelight. "We should make this a tradition," Lena signed. "Come here every Christmas Eve. Remember where we started." "I'd like that," Ethan signed back. The girls bounded over, still wearing their flower crowns from the ceremony, demanding attention. "Can we go home now?" Emma asked. "I want to get out of this dress." "Me too," Sophie agreed. Mila signed, "Yeah, this was the best day ever." "The best day so far," Lena corrected, signing with one hand while pulling Mila close with the other. They walked out of the restaurant together into the spring night. The truck was decorated with tin cans and streamers, courtesy of some of Ethan's crew. The girls piled into the back seat, exhausted and happy. Ethan held the door for Lena, kissing her before she climbed in. As they drove home through quiet streets, Ethan thought about the journey that had brought them here, the grief and loss, the chance encounter, the slow building of trust, the courage it took to love again. At home, the girls changed into pajamas and insisted on a family movie night despite the late hour. They piled onto the couch, all five of them crammed together in a tangle of limbs and blankets, and put on a movie they'd seen 100 times. Halfway through, Ethan looked around. Emma had fallen asleep on Lena's shoulder. Sophie was curled up against his side, fighting to keep her eyes open. Mila was the only one still awake, her attention focused on the TV screen. Lena caught his eye and signed one-handed. "This is everything." And it was. This messy, imperfect, beautiful family they'd built from pieces of broken hearts. This life they'd chosen when it would have been easier to stay stuck in grief. This love that honored the past while embracing the future. Years later, they would return to Hartwell's Bistro on Christmas Eve, as promised. The girls would grow into remarkable young women. Mila, a professional deaf actress and advocate, Sophie, a veterinarian specializing in rehabilitation, Emma, a celebrated artist whose work appeared in galleries across the country. They would bring partners, eventually children of their own, to that same table. The brass plaque would remain, a permanent reminder of the night everything changed. Ethan and Lena would grow old together, their love deepening with time. They would face challenges, health scares, financial pressures, the ordinary struggles of long-term partnership, but they would face them together with the same compassion and courage that had brought them together in the first place. Lena's consulting firm would grow into a national force for accessibility advocacy, changing building codes and corporate policies across the country. Ethan's construction company would become known for going beyond minimum requirements, for buildings that truly welcomed everyone. And through it all, Julia's memory would remain alive, not as a ghost haunting them, but as a foundation they built upon. The girls would tell their children about the grandmother they'd never met, about her strength and kindness and fierce love. They would visit her grave on her birthday, leaving flowers and sharing news about their lives. Because that was the truth Ethan and Lena had discovered. Love doesn't end with death, and moving forward doesn't mean leaving behind. It means carrying the best of what came before into everything that comes after. But on this night, the night of the wedding, Ethan didn't think about the distant future. He just held his family close and let himself feel grateful for the present, for the woman asleep against his shoulder, for the daughters he'd raised and the one who'd chosen to join them, for the second chance he'd almost been too afraid to take. The movie ended. Ethan gently woke the sleeping girls and herded them upstairs to bed. Lena kissed each of them goodnight, signing, "I love you," before turning off the lights. Downstairs, Ethan and Lena stood in the kitchen, exhausted but content. "We did it," Lena signed. "We're married." "We are," Ethan agreed. "What do we do now?" Ethan smiled. "We live, fully, completely, without fear." just like we promised. Lena kissed him, soft and sweet. I like that plan. They turned off the lights and headed upstairs, hand in hand. Behind them, the house settled into quiet. The dining room table stood ready for tomorrow's breakfast, 6 chairs arranged around it. No empty spaces, no ghosts. Just room for the family that had found each other in the most unexpected way. And in the morning, they would wake up and do it all again, making breakfast, settling arguments, planning their days, loving each other through the mundane and the extraordinary. Building a life worth living, one small moment at a time. Because in the end, that was what the empty chair had taught them. That loss creates space, but what we choose to fill that space with defines us. They had chosen love, chosen connection, chosen to honor grief while refusing to be imprisoned by it. And that choice had made all the difference. The snow began to fall outside, silent and steady, blanketing the world in white. Inside, the house was warm and full and alive with the promise of tomorrow.